There are destinations you visit, and then there are destinations that visit you back, that get underneath your skin, rearrange something quietly inside you, and refuse to leave long after you have returned to the ordinary rhythm of your life. Long after the suitcase is unpacked, long after the jet lag fades. New Zealand is that second kind of place. It is not a destination you simply check off a list. It is a place that marks you. This is a country where glaciers descend almost to sea level, ending in rainforests so green it seems to generate its own light, where ancient volcanoes still breathe and steam, where a single morning drive can carry you through dense native bush, across an alpine plateau dusted with snow, past a lake the color of turquoise glass, and down into a vineyard valley, all before lunch. Where the Maori people have held their bond with this land for over 7 centuries, naming it Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, and pouring into those words a reverence for place that most of the modern world has long forgotten how to feel. 2 islands, one extraordinary world, and a journey that, once taken, becomes something you spend the rest of your life trying to adequately explain to people who have not yet been. Tucked away in the southwestern corner of the Pacific Ocean, New Zealand sits in magnificent isolation, 2 main islands, roughly the size of the United Kingdom, home to fewer than 5 million people. That ratio, vast, dramatic, geologically restless land divided among very few, is perhaps the single most important thing to understand before you arrive. The nature here is not decorative. It has not been arranged for your viewing pleasure. It is not a backdrop. It is the main event, operating entirely on its own terms, indifferent and overwhelming and breathtaking in equal measure. From the subtropical bays of the far north, where the sea runs warm and islands scatter across sheltered harbors like something from a painting, to the subantarctic winds that tear in from the deep south across landscapes so remote they feel like the very edge of the planet, New Zealand packs more geological drama per square kilometer than almost anywhere else on Earth. It sits on the boundary of the Australian and Pacific tectonic plates, which means active volcanoes, geothermal valleys where the ground bubbles and steams, and mountain ranges that are still, in geological terms, very much a work in progress. And then there is its cultural soul, something that separates New Zealand from every other great natural destination on the planet. The Maori arrived on these shores over 700 years ago in great ocean-going waka, navigating thousands of kilometers of open Pacific by stars and instinct alone. Their presence here is not history in the dusty, archived sense of the word. It is alive. Their language is an official language of the country. Their worldview, which sees rivers, mountains, and forests not as resources, but as ancestors deserving of protection, has shaped New Zealand's laws, its politics, and its identity in ways that grow more significant with every passing year. It has also become, in recent decades, the world's most cinematic country, the backdrop for the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies, King Kong, The Piano, The Last Samurai, and Whale Rider. Filmmakers come here because the landscapes look like something a screenwriter invented at their most ambitious. They are not inventions. New Zealand simply looks like that. Now let's travel through the very best of it, place by place, from its ancient fjords to its still-breathing volcanoes. Milford Sound. Milford Sound is where most journeys through New Zealand begin, and for very good reason. Nestled within the vast wilderness of Fiordland National Park in the southwestern corner of the South Island, it forms part of Te Waihiponamu, a UNESCO World Heritage Site covering millions of hectares of ancient, rain-soaked landscape, shaped by ice and time into something that operates outside the normal vocabulary of natural beauty. Despite its name, Milford Sound is not actually a sound at all. It is a fjord carved over millions of years by glaciations of staggering power, a deep channel of dark water hemmed in by cliff faces rising sheer and enormous to heights of over 1,200 meters. Standing at the waterline and looking up at those walls of rock and hanging forest, you feel the weight of geological time pressing down on you in a way that is impossible to ignore. What makes Milford truly extraordinary is the weather. It rains here over 180 days a year, one of the wettest places on Earth. And the rain does not diminish the experience, it transforms it. When the clouds descend, hundreds of temporary waterfalls appear across the cliff faces as if conjured from nothing, some dropping over 500 meters in a single unbroken cascade. The fjord fills with mist. The boundary between water and sky dissolves. You are left with is something that feels less like a landscape and more like a state of mind. Cruising these waters, you may encounter fur seals draped over rocks at the waterline, Fiordland crested penguins navigating the rocky shores, and dolphins riding the bow wake of your boat with what looks, for all the world, like pure joy. Milford Sound is also the only fjord in New Zealand accessible by road, and the drive-in through the Homer Tunnel and ancient beech forest is itself a journey worth making. The destination is extraordinary, but so is the getting there. Queenstown. From Fiordland, move northeast and the energy shifts entirely. Queenstown is not subtle. It does not ask you to slow down or be still. Nestled between the deep blue of Lake Tekapo and the jagged skyline of the Remarkable's mountain range, this compact lakeside town has built an entire identity around the belief that ordinary is simply not enough. It invented commercial bungee jumping right here, at the Kawarau Bridge in 1988. It pioneered jet boating through narrow river canyons. It offers skydiving, whitewater rafting on the wild Shotover River, paragliding, canyoning, and heli-skiing with a casualness that still surprises first-time visitors. The adrenaline here is genuine, the risks are real, and the experiences stay with you in a way that manufactured thrills never quite do. But spend more than a day in Queenstown, and you discover its quieter self, the one that takes a gondola up Bob's Peak at sunset, watches the light drain slowly from 4 mountain ranges, and lingers over a glass of Central Otago Pinot Noir that genuinely belongs in the same conversation as the finest wines on earth. The Gippsland Valley, just 40 minutes by car, sits in high-altitude schist country of almost absurd beauty, home to award-winning wineries that feel like one of New Zealand's better-kept secrets. And for those who came here partly out of love for Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings filming locations surrounding Queenstown make it immediately obvious why Peter Jackson chose this landscape to stand in for Middle-earth. Standing in these places, the choice feels less like a decision and more like an inevitability. Some landscapes are simply destined to become myth. Fox and Franz Josef Glaciers. Further along the South Island's west coast, the Fox and Franz Josef Glaciers offer something geologically improbable. 2 rivers of ancient ice descending almost to sea level, ending not in Arctic tundra but in lush temperate rainforest. Most glaciers in the world demand high altitude, long approaches, and serious preparation. Here, a short walk through tree ferns brings you face to face with walls of ancient ice glowing blue-green in diffused light, and the contrast between the frozen world above and the living forest around you creates a visual tension that the mind keeps trying and failing to fully resolve. The valley floors are scarred with horizontal striations left by centuries of glacial advance and retreat, a timeline written directly into the rock, legible to anyone willing to stop and read it. For those who want to go deeper, helicopters land on the ice itself, where guides lead walks through crevasses and ice caves into a world that feels as remote and ancient as anything on Earth. Go now. The glaciers are receding faster than at almost any point in recorded history. What exists today will not exist in the same form a generation from now, and that urgency is not hyperbole, it is fact. To stand on this ice is to stand on something that will not wait for you to get around to it. Lake Tekapo. Inland from the glaciers, the Mackenzie Basin holds one of New Zealand's most quietly overwhelming experiences. Lake Tekapo's extraordinary color comes from glacial flour, finely ground rock suspended in meltwater that scatters light into a shade of turquoise, so vivid it looks digitally altered in every photograph ever taken of it. In person, it looks even more impossible. It shifts with the season and the angle of the sky, and in every condition it presents itself as something that should not be real but undeniably, stubbornly is. On its shore stands the Church of the Good Shepherd, a small stone chapel built in 1935, framed by the water and the snow-capped two-thumb range beyond it. It is one of the most photographed scenes in the entire country, and one of the rare few that is actually better in person than in any image. There is a stillness to it, a quality of light and proportion and silence that photographs can gesture toward but never quite capture. Tekapo's greatest secret, however, reveals itself after dark. The Mackenzie Basin is one of the world's few international dark sky reserves, meaning artificial light is strictly controlled, and the night sky here is extraordinary in a way that most people alive today have genuinely never experienced. The Milky Way is not a faint suggestion at the edge of vision, but a structural feature of the sky, wide, tailed, textured, impossibly close seeming. Stargazing tour from the Mount John Observatory take you through Saturn's rings, distant nebulae, and ancient star clusters that belong to a completely different order of experience. To lie on your back at Tekapo and look up is to feel, briefly but unmistakably, the true scale of the universe pressing down on you. It is one of the most profound things this country offers, and it costs nothing but a clear night. Tongariro National Park. Cross to the North Island, and the landscape becomes geothermal, primal, and ancient in a completely different way. Tongariro National Park, established in 1887 and New Zealand's oldest, holds a distinction shared by very few places on Earth. It is a dual UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized both for its extraordinary volcanic geology and for its deep spiritual significance to the Maori people, who regard the mountains here not as landmarks but as Tapuna ancestors, as living presences, as family. The landscape is volcanic and completely unapologetic about it. Mount Ngauruhoe, which you may recognize as Mount Doom from Peter Jackson's films, rises in near-perfect symmetrical cone above the plateau. Mount Ruapehu, the North Island's highest point, is an active volcano that has erupted within living memory and carries about it the quiet authority of something that has not finished its work. The ground steams. Crater lakes glow in shades of turquoise and emerald so vivid they appear digitally enhanced. They are not. This is simply what active geothermal chemistry looks like up close. The Tongariro Alpine Crossing, 19.4 kilometers of trail traversing this landscape, is consistently ranked among the world's great single-day hikes. You walk through ancient lava fields, past volcanic craters, across terrain that looks borrowed from another planet, and makes you question, pleasantly, everything you previously assumed about what the surface of the Earth could look like. It is a hike that changes people. You set out in the morning through beech forest and arrive, 7 or 8 hours later, having crossed something that genuinely rearranged your sense of the world's possibilities. Rotorua. If Tongariro shows you volcanic New Zealand from above, Rotorua shows it to you from below. This city on the shores of Lake Rotorua sits directly above one of the most geothermally active zones on the planet, and it does not pretend otherwise. The sulfur smell greets you before the city does. The ground bubbles. Geysers erupt on schedule. The earth here is alive in the most literal possible sense, and the effect is both unsettling and completely magnificent. Te Puia, in the Aotearoa geothermal valley, is the spiritual and cultural heart of Rotorua. The Pohutu geyser erupts here up to 20 times a day, reaching heights of 30 meters, and beside it, the New Zealand Maori Arts and Crafts Institute preserves master traditions of carving and weaving that stretch back centuries. The Maori people of this place, the Ngati Wako, have lived alongside these geothermal features for generations, cooking in the boiling pools, healing in the warm earth, building a culture that treats the volatile landscape not as a hazard but as a home. Beyond the geothermal valleys, Rotorua offers hangi feasts cooked underground in the traditional way, haka performances that make the air in the room physically vibrate, and the redwoods forest on the city's edge home to mountain biking trails that attract riders from across the world. Rotorua is raw, earthy, alive, and unlike anywhere else. It smells like sulfur. After a day here, you won't mind at all. Wellington. Every country has a capital that functions more as an administrative necessity than a destination worth lingering in. Wellington is the glorious, emphatic exception to that rule. Compact, walkable, draped across steep hills above a harbor that catches the wind with legendary enthusiasm, New Zealand's capital is one of the most culturally alive cities of its size anywhere on Earth. Wellington has more cafes, restaurants, and bars per capita than New York City, a fact that sounds like a boast until you walk Cuba Street on a Saturday morning and realize it is simply a description. The creative energy here is genuine and unpretentious, fed by a community small enough that artists, chefs, musicians, and filmmakers all exist within the same few degrees of separation, cross-pollinating constantly. The Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongariro, sits on the waterfront and is free to enter, which tells you something important about Wellington's values and priorities. Inside, the museum explores Maori heritage and New Zealand's natural history with depth, honesty, and emotional intelligence that is genuinely moving. As evening falls over the city, the Zealandia Eco Sanctuary offers guided nocturnal walks through predator-free native bush, where you may encounter kiwi birds foraging in the dark, shy, ancient fly, GHT-less creatures that exist nowhere else on Earth and carry about them an air of something very old and very precious. Wellington at night, with a kiwi somewhere nearby in the shadows, is one of the most quietly extraordinary experiences this country has to offer. Bay of Islands. Head north from Auckland, up into the subtropical warmth of Northland, and the country shifts register entirely. The Bay of Islands, 144 islands scattered across a sheltered harbor on the east coast, is where New Zealand's modern history began, and where its most unhurried pleasures still reside, largely unchanged and entirely worth seeking out. Waitangi, where the Treaty of Waitangi was signed in 1840 between the British Crown and over 500 Maori chiefs, sits on the harbor's edge and carries the weight of that moment in every stone and carved beam. The treaty grounds, the historic Treaty House, the vast carved meeting house, the Great War Canoe speak to an agreement of immense and ongoing consequence, one that New Zealand continues to interpret, debate, and reckon with in ways that make it a living document rather than a historical artifact. But the Bay of Islands is also one of the finest sailing destinations in the Southern Hemisphere. The water is warm, the anchorages are sheltered, and the marine life is exceptional. Pods of dolphins that follow boats with apparent enthusiasm, game fish in the open water, and outstanding diving among the submerged rocks of the outer islands. The small town of Russell, a short ferry ride from Pahia and New Zealand's first European settlement, carries its history lightly and beautifully. The Duke of Marlborough Hotel, holding New Zealand's oldest liquor license, is an excellent place to sit, look out at the harbor, and feel that history settle gently around you. Kaikoura. There is an underwater canyon just off the Kaikoura coast that drops thousands of meters below the surface, creating a powerful upwelling of deep, nutrient-rich water that draws marine life in concentrations that marine biologists still find remarkable. For the traveler, the result is one of the most accessible and extraordinary wildlife encounters anywhere on the planet. Sperm whales, the largest toothed predators that have ever lived, are present in these waters year-round. Whale watching tours depart multiple times daily, and the encounter rate is consistently high. Watching a sperm whale dive, its great gray body curving slowly at the surface before the enormous flukes lift into the air, and the animal slips silently into the deep, is a moment of scale that recalibrates everything you thought you understood about size and power and the natural world. These are ancient, enormous creatures, and they are here, just minutes offshore from a small coastal town. The first seal colony at the southern end of town occupies its wave-washed rocks with magnificent indifference. Dusky dolphins move through in groups sometimes numbering in the hundreds, their acrobatics seemingly performed purely for the pleasure of it. And behind all of this, the Kaikoura Ranges rise abruptly and dramatically from the coast, snow-capped for much of the year, impossibly close to the sea, creating a backdrop so striking it looks deliberately composed. The town offers one final pleasure: crayfish, pulled fresh from these waters and served simply, as the finest ingredients always should be. Auckland. New Zealand's largest city carries its history in its Maori name, Tamaki Makaurau, meaning the maiden pursued by 100 suitors. For centuries, this land was fiercely sought after for its fertile volcanic soil, its strategic position between two seas, and its natural harbors that offered shelter and access in equal measure. Today it is a thriving, diverse metropolis of over 1.5 million people, where the relationship between urban energy and natural landscape is closer and more genuine than in almost any comparable city in the world. Auckland is built across 48 volcanic cones, each offering views that remind you, at every turn, that the city exists on land that is geologically alive. More than 50 islands sit within reach by ferry, providing breathing room and adventure within an hour of the city center. The Sky Tower, 328 meters of concrete and glass that has defined the skyline for over 25 years, rewards those who ascend it with 360-degree views across the Hauraki Gulf and the Waitemata Harbor that make the city's extraordinary geography immediately, viscerally clear. The beaches at Piha, black sand, powerful surf, cliffs at each end, sit just 40 minutes west of the city center and represent, in miniature, everything wild and dramatic about the New Zealand coastline. To the east, the Coromandel Peninsula offers hot water beaches and ancient kauri forests within easy driving distance. Auckland is a city, but it is a city that has never entirely forgotten it is also a piece of this land, and that land has never entirely let it. New Zealand is a small country, but it carries a weight of beauty and meaning that places many times its size cannot match. It is a place of geological youth and cultural depth, a place where the land is still being actively formed by forces moving beneath it, and where a people have lived in profound, reciprocal relationship with that land for centuries. A place where adventure is genuinely available, not packaged or padded or sanitized for comfort, but real, with consequence and reward in honest proportion. A place where the wildlife is ancient and irreplaceable and present, and where the night sky still looks the way it did before electricity changed our relationship with darkness forever. It is also, and finally, one of the most beautiful places on Earth. Not in the curated, managed way of a garden or a resort, but in the wild, excessive, sometimes overwhelming way of a planet that does not particularly care whether you are watching, but is magnificent regardless. People who visit New Zealand often struggle to describe it afterward, not because it is beyond words, but because the words that come feel genuinely inadequate for what they are trying to carry. Beautiful is true but insufficient. Dramatic captures the geology but misses the stillness. Peaceful misses the electricity of it entirely. Perhaps Aotearoa says it best: the long white cloud, a name given by people who arrived after an immense ocean crossing and looked at this island horizon and found, in the language they brought with them, something that held both the thing they were seeing and the feeling it created simultaneously, without separation. That is what New Zealand does. It gets into you at that level, the level where landscape and feeling stop being two different things and become one. And once it does, you carry it with you, always.